thank you so much for being part of this and for allowing me to interview you. I feel honoured to interview you, Sandra. I hear you've been doing some very exciting work, which we'll be talking about in a sec. But first, let me just introduce you to anybody that's listening that doesn't know you. I think an awful lot of people in the EFT world do know you. But Sandra from Lytham St Anne's in Lancashire, North England.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sandra Taylor, certified EFT therapist and supervisor, certified trainer, one of 2 EFT trainers in Britain, and co-head of the British Emotionally Focused Therapy Centre and founder, I believe, yeah?
One of the founders, yeah.
One of the founders of BEFT, our centre. Thank you so much for coming and talking to me today about something specific that you've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you've been, in your training role, you've been running the first ever externship for LGBTQ plus therapists.
Well, it's an LGBTQ plus centred externship, so it's open to anybody to attend. Many of the people were LGBTQ plus, but we also had some allies as well. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. You're very used to doing lots of training. Obviously, you run externships and core skills for Britain and for Poland.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but this is a new venture.
Yes.
Yes, lovely. Welcome, Sandra. How else would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, thank you very much, Celia, for having me. I want to say that first, yeah. I want to add that I'm white. I'm a cisgender woman, and my pronouns are she and her. I'm middle-aged. I'm a lesbian in a long-term marriage with no children, disabled and a carer. I'm Catholic, and I come from a working-class background, but I've got a PhD. So those are some of the elements of my identity that I want to share that help give context to who I am.
Thank you. Yes. All these contexts, these intersectionality contexts, important to who you are, and perhaps part of your story about how you came to this point in your life to run this externship, this specific externship, international, yeah, along with Robert Allan. I'm really interested, Sandra, in knowing the story about how you got to this point to start this externship, to put it out and be a forerunner in this area of training. Yeah,
it's something that I've always wanted to do, is to have my kind of LGBTQ plus kind of life in my work more fully. And, I've done other projects. As a Catholic, I was involved in a European organisation and co-edited a book with my wife on Catholic people's stories, LGBTQ European Catholic stories. So that was one way that kind of really satisfied me in terms of really exploring being a part of the LGBTQ plus community in a way that was also really helpful to other people. And in EFT, it was like I've always been kind of open, and I've always been interested in sort of adding more diversity to what I've been doing, but never really kind of strongly getting that into my work. And I'd met Robert years ago, and at some point turned to him because I wanted some peer supervision on some work that I was doing. And we just got talking. Yeah, it was something that he really wanted as well. So we kind of really gelled and brought different things to the table, really. Yeah. And just got really excited about the possibilities of being able to do it together. And so we talked, and we, gradually kind of sorted out a picture of that and took it to the ISEF board, and they agreed that we could run an externship and see how that went.
So it was really good meeting Robert and being able to do it together, bouncing off each other and enthuse each other. And that's important. important part of how it was born. And tell me more. I'd love to know more about the difference. Perhaps the difference, because I've been on an externship in London. I think this one was in the same location. Was it in London?
Yeah, it was in Resource for London. Yeah,
Resource for London. Yeah. Can you tell me more about, you know, why you felt there was a need and what was different about this one than the general externship that many of us have been on?
If you think about the general externship and sort of being inclusive, it's like, you know, there's the odd sentence here and there. There's the odd video that might be a same-sex couple, for example. There's images that, you know, we use on slides, which are a whole variation of different kind of races and sexualities and ages and all sorts of things. But it doesn't really address any kind of diversity in any detail because it can't, you know, it's trying to cover so much. And when you're doing an LGBTQ plus centered externship, it's different on so many levels. So the first level is that you're saying this is what it is and that it is open to all therapists, and that includes LGBTQ plus people and people who are affirmative of them. Yeah, so one of the things that people said about it was, I can breathe. Yeah, that they could bring that part of their identity into the room knowing that it absolutely had a space. Yeah, a space that Robert and I would support, and a space that should be accepted and welcomed in that room. And that isn't the case in any other training. Yeah, we can say we're welcoming of everything, but participants may not be welcoming. Trainers may not be fully welcoming or aware enough to be doing it in an okay way.
Yes.
So for you to be able to kind of walk into that room and know that that fundamental part of your being is welcomed and wanted meant that people could bring their whole attention to learning. Yeah, rather than, you know, attention which might be very conscious or it might be subconscious of, do I come out, do I not come out, how will I be, you know, what will this be about, will I even see myself in the materials that are being presented, or will I have to translate it from a heterosexual perspective to a perspective? Yeah, so that was one of the things. And then interestingly enough, there were some people there who were allies, so they were heterosexual, but they were interested and they were working with LGBTQ plus people. And some of those were saying, I have never experienced so profoundly being in a minority and feeling safe and held enough to be able to let myself really enter into that. So it was also
heterosexual people that in that position were in the minority, and they were experiencing what many of the LGBTQ plus participants would usually experience in the general externship.
In the general externship and in most of their lives.
And in life.
Yeah. So that was that. I mean,
it enabled a level of being able to just breathe and relax and just focus on the training and not feel they have to worry about translation. Yeah,
exactly.
I see.
And then we had so Robert is a gay man and I am a lesbian woman, and we had 12 helpers. So we had 6 that were ones that we'd used before and you know were just to have with us again, Britain based, and we had 6 who came from North America. You know, everybody paying their own way because there weren't any resources to support that, you know, because they wanted to be part of it. And across that spectrum, we had, you know, a whole variety of LGBTQ plus people and their allies. So all the LGBTQ plus participants also saw themselves reflected in the helpers, and the kind of support that the helpers could give was many and varied because of the different elements of their identity. But it was like, you know, they knew that, you know, we were in this together and we were exploring and supporting and being with. Yeah. So that part of it was profound. Never mind what we then did, if you like. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's one whole layer of just being able to be in that room, welcomed, belonging, bringing their full selves and therefore their full attention and their full ability to kind of learn and be in that room.
Yes, I see that, being able to absolutely step in and be open and honest and just free to be themselves. Yeah. And relaxed and welcomed in a way on a training that probably is quite rare.
Very, very rare. Yeah, I don't think that there are many trainings that are like that. Yeah, I think, you know, in Britain, we would look to somewhere like Pink Therapy, who I'm doing some training with now as a participant, who do amazing, you know, courses around LGBTQ plus people. You know, another thing that was different is that when we were doing the introductions to the course, when we were starting, one of the things that I was saying was, this is a celebration. You know, we can all be here in this way, in this open way. Yeah. And a caution, yeah, because some people there would not be open necessarily in their lives about their sexual orientation, sexuality. It might not be safe for them to be. Yeah. So one of the things that I was also saying was that people needed to be cautious about how they were taking information away from the externship and sharing it with other people around, you know, other participants.
Yes.
And I was thinking before, when I thought about needing to say that, I have never said that in a training before.
You've never felt the need to protect people's identity, that they might go away and talk about each other. I wonder why you haven't said that before, but you really felt the need to say it this time.
Because it was an LGBTQ plus predominant participant group. Yes. And when we're in that group together, we can be free and open and absolutely kind of relax. And out of that room in our worlds, a lot of people will not be able to be like that. Yeah.
Yes, they're so used to, some members, participants maybe are so used to having to portray something different to the world or to their colleagues. And it was unusual setting, a celebratory setting where they could be free, but that might not be the case back at home or back at work or back in the families.
Absolutely. It wouldn't necessarily be safe at so many different levels. So, for example, we did live sessions that had been pre-recorded. One had been for a previous course and one had been specifically for this course. Now, one of those couples were incredibly brave, and they, because they were a couple where it's illegal for them to be in their relationship in the country that they live in.
Right.
Yeah. So
How wonderful that you were able to meet together and feel that free, and that by your guidance we're able to perhaps feel that safe to train together, to explore your identities together, to be relaxed, perhaps in a way that is even illegal or isn't safe at home. But you created that safety. I can imagine how well you would have done that.
Yeah. And with one of the live couples being from a country where it was illegal to have their relationship, it was profound that they agreed, that their therapist worked with them to get agreement and that Robert worked with them. That was just so incredibly moving, and I think it just made such a point that we were all aware of. But how many times do we have in a course, reflection on a group of people where it is, in many countries illegal, even with a death penalty, to be, for example, lesbian and gay.
very special.
Yeah.
Very special, and I would imagine many deep relationships probably were born in this gathering that you created, you and Robert set up and created, of worldwide therapists, LGBTQ plus therapists, some of which are just not able to be free at home, can get together, even just alone. We haven't even talked about training particularly yet, but just the gathering, gathering itself.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And most people were from England, but we also had people from Wales, from Scotland, from Hong Kong, from Poland, from France, and from the USA.
I wondered about this, Sandra, because when you said it was an international thing, I was thinking, I wonder how that worked, you know, because in this day and age, it would have been a Zoom, but this was in person.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so we had people from all those countries, and that was gorgeous. And certainly the next one we're doing, which will be online, we're aiming to have people from a lot more countries, and who, you know, wouldn't necessarily have the ability to, or the funds to be able to travel. Yeah. So that will be, yeah, we're expecting a much more diversity of country, even though it'll be based on an American time zone. Yeah.
Okay.
So then also, you know, what else is different is, you know, content, in terms of the focus is not on heterosexual relationships. And it's like, you might just say, but aren't all relationships the same? But actually that comes from what we would call a heteronormative perspective, which is that we're so used to coming from a heterosexual perspective that we can just look at, you know, the usual externship and just say, well, isn't that everybody? But actually, no, you know, it doesn't, you know, really take account of some of the diversity that we have in the world, you know. So this specific course being about LGBTQ, and obviously that intersects anyway with race, with age, with disability, with all sorts of other things. But, you know, this was the primary focus.
Yeah.
So all the examples that we used were LGBTQ plus. All the videos that we used were some, you know, part of the LGBTQ plus. When we were looking at theory, we were looking at it through a lens of LGBTQ. So, you know, that would be things like looking at attachment theory.
Yes.
And looking at it in terms of, there's a book that I particularly like, which is Andrew Solomon's Far from the Tree. He talks about when, you know, many of the features of us are ones that we take from our parents. Yeah. So, but then there are certain other features that we take primarily not from our parents. Yeah. So we talked about vertical and horizontal identities. Yeah. So being LGBTQ plus is usually a horizontal identity. It's one that not many people take, if you like, from their parents. So we're different from them. And that and many of us have an awareness of that at some level, quite young in our lives. And it affects how we can be in that primary relationship of parents and caregivers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, you know, we're here.
Different.
Yes, exactly. And children pick up very easily the sense of, and I can't share that difference. They might not have words for it, or they might not have examples that are positive around them. They may actually have some very negative examples around them. But for many, there's this sense of it isn't okay to share this. You know, they'll have picked up indicators along the way. And when you are not able to share something that feels that makes you really different, it affects the way that you then relate to those people who are closest to you and how you evolve yourself in the world.
You wouldn't have such a experience of a secure attachment bond where you can just share your whole self. There's something guarded there, or anticipating perhaps some rejection or misunderstanding.
Yes, and
Yes.
obviously we do nowadays hear so many more stories about, where parents and caregivers are positive and people have amazing experiences. And though, that's wonderful. But what we're also seeing is, an awful lot of bullying in school. We're seeing, parents rejecting their children, people who are LGBTQ plus, sort of generally, if you like, have, more challenges in terms of addictions and homelessness and mental health and physical ill health. And these aren't about being LGBTQ plus per se. They're about the impact of living with that in the world and in their relationships with others.
Being marginalized, misunderstood, judged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So examples that we would use, that might be to do with a role play, or it might be to do with exploring a kind of experiences. I'll give you some examples that might just help you kind of see some of the differences, which might, come from the therapy that I've done with people, but also, from other sources. So, it might be things like exploring what it's like for a couple where they grew up without the right to get married and then have the right to get married. And they've got maybe parents who seem to be quite accepting. And then one set of parents are really thrilled about the wedding and one say, no, that's a step too far. Yeah. How do the couple experience that? How do they work with that together? How do they deal with the fact that one set of parents is so different from another?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I know in heterosexual relationships, there are all sorts of reasons why parents might not come to somebody's wedding, but it wouldn't be based on the sexual orientation. And it's like, it's okay up to this far and it's not okay there. It might be things like, somebody told me of the story of they didn't quite get why they felt so uncomfortable, but they knew this experience where they had been with the two of them had been with the family of one of them, their biological family. And the mother had said, I want to take a picture of the family. Who's going to take the picture? Could it be this person? Mm. And the partner had asked them to take the picture. Yeah. And it wasn't until afterwards, when they kind of brought it in a kind of unclear way, that they kind of rowed, but they didn't really know what they'd rowed about, that we could actually explore it from the lens of, what does that mean about where you belong in this family, and how each of you see family, and how you are in that interface between your biological family and your partner, and how they fit in to this family. So sometimes it's also about being proactive in supporting people to see when something is LGBTQ plus based, because we're all used to living in a heteronormative world and we don't always notice ourselves when something is based on, a kind of sort of an exclusion of one's partner from the family. And so it might be that. It might also be things like exploring coming out processes. So we're looking at that on the course. Coming out theory becoming much more complex now. It used to be something about, have you come out, as if it was a one-off thing. Yeah. Now what we're looking at much more is that it's an ongoing thing. And it isn't something that is just something that you look at and you say, you've got to come out to be sorted and to be kind of proud of who you are. But actually there are choices people make in different experiences. I love the theory. One of the writers about it actually talks more about kind of coming in, about, rather than it being about coming out, it's about who you choose to invite into your internal world, and looking at some of the intersectionality of that. Yes. So, for example, people who, for example, are immigrants who might have a particular culture and it's been really important to be in that family. It's very close knit. Yeah. For them to come out as LGBTQ in that environment, you know, could be a great expectation of rejection, and their kind of culture and family has a lot more importance to them than some other people, where it's like, you either accept me as I am or I'm gone, kind of thing. And that each is fine. It's like it's about each individual choice, you know, for a complexity of reasons. So as you can hear, it's like there's so many different levels at which the experiences are potentially quite different. And being able to use examples that acknowledge those and make those primary and not just a tag in to a more heteronormative experience is just amazing.
It sounds amazing. And it's, I mean, having not experienced this, you know, it's fascinating, you know, to hear about the struggles within to accept within, but also the struggles all along the way with partners, with external family, of how they are being reactive or rejecting, accepting, levels of acceptance all around, which just complicates the bonding, complicates, you know, the cycles that we get into. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And another thing that's kind of linked into it is that when we are doing things that are more kind of heteronormative, we're also tending to see relationships as always being, you know, the valued ones, being about, you know, two people getting together in a stable relationship for the rest of eternity. Yeah. Whereas in the LGBTQ plus community, they you know, we have a whole range of non-acceptance through law, through mental health, mental illness categories. You know, there are whole ways in which, you know, our existence has been kind of made very negative. And one of the things it does is it kind of frees you up to come outside of the rules and to, you know, choose what to do about that. Yeah, so you will see more diversity than in the heterosexual community. In terms of, there'll be people who are married and in long-term steady monogamous relationships. You'll find more people who are polyamorous than in the heterosexual community. You will find more people, especially gay men, who may have more casual sex, perhaps alongside a steady relationship or not.
Yes.
Yeah, you'll see evolving and changing sexuality and sexual orientation. Yeah, that it doesn't have to be something that is fixed, that it evolves over time. So some of those assumptions were also kind of put to one side because they don't necessarily belong. And I think that's one of the things that the LGBTQ plus experience has to offer in terms of the heterosexual world as well. It's like all, you know, a lot of those things exist, but they're more minority within the heterosexual community. But getting more flexibility and fluidity is something that the LGBTQ plus community has always given to the heterosexual community in music and arts and fashion and in so many different ways. And we can do it in terms of relationships as well. Acknowledging what is already there, as well as particular, you know, nuances of kind of specifics to the LGBT.
More freedom than perhaps has been seen traditionally. More freedom, and this is a gift.
Yeah.
And take me into how the different expressions of sexuality and the expressions of, well, the types of relationship, the non-heterosexual normative relationships, how that relates to the EFT that we've studied, you know, in terms of secure bonding, traditionally between two people.
So if you look, for example, at relationships where I think I would be accurate in saying there's, you know, research done, for example, on polyamorous relationships, or relationships where people have a steady partner and maybe have casual sex. Yeah, and people looking at the attachment, at the satisfaction with relationships, at a whole range of things that are about what we would see as positivity around relationships compared with heterosexual monogamous couples. Yeah, and the research shows that they are just as stable. You know, people are at least as satisfied, if not more satisfied, in those relationships. That the assumptions that people have made about it being fractured, about it being about people being, you know, not very sorted, are wrong, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm.
So the work has
also, yeah, and so for example, some of the research has sort of also looked, because one of the things about some research kind of lumps together, particularly lesbian and gay, lesbian women and gay men, or LGBT people. Obviously, you get less and less research as you go into bisexual and then transgender and
okay, yeah,
queer. But when some research has been done, which has been heterosexual couples and lesbian couples and gay couples, and you know they look at things like lesbian couples often resolve from arguments best of all three, because one of the things they do is often they talk an awful lot more in terms of sorting out the relationships.
Yes.
So there's all sorts of things that are coming out more and more where people are actually being able to look at these and to look at them with a better eye. Because if you go into research and you already have assumptions of negativity, then you will tend to find negativity. So we're now seeing more research which is looking in a more neutral or positive stance, and the results are really good.
Great. So as therapists, the traditional EFT process is the same, because we're still looking at building the security and helping couples to bond in the same way.
Exactly. I mean, the thing is that EFT is a beautiful model. Yeah, and it, you know, I have no trouble in believing that it really does cover everybody when it's used effectively. Yeah, so it was very interesting on the course because I think for me it's like, I think, you know, more of the videos that I was showing, you would look at it and you would think, what's the difference? Yeah, isn't Sandra doing the same she would do if this was a heterosexual couple? Because there was nothing there that was particularly, except for maybe placing ourselves at the beginning and you know, as knowing and naming, you know, that difference of not being heterosexual.
Yes.
And so except for kind of acknowledging that who we were kind of affects who we are and might be relevant. And my live session, for example, didn't have anything in it that was specific to the LGBTQ plus community, to the queer couple that I had there.
Yes.
But the differences were that I was using the pronouns that they wanted. So one was they and one was she. And that what we were doing in essence, you know, still had an essence in my awareness of the context of their lives. But if you were looking at it, you would think, can't actually see the difference. Yeah.
Yes.
Robert, the couple that he worked with, he absolutely brought in much more of the specificity of their experience of, for example, their relationship being illegal, of certain kinds of pressures and nuances of their relationship that had really impacted it. And so both are true. It's like there are times when what we're doing is essentially exactly the same. And if you saw it, you would think there's no apparent difference. But it's also those times when that specific experience is absolutely front and center.
Yes.
And you can't do a really good first one, you know, without really having some kind of context in which to hold this couple.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if, for example, I wasn't comfortable with a queer couple, I wouldn't be stepping in to that space with them in the way that I was able to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The same work, but with a greater exploration, understanding about of their experience, because they are LGBTQ plus. Yeah, much more exploration of their experience in the world, experience, well, as you said, it sounds like exploring more, asking more questions, remembering the pronouns, asking them perhaps, how is this, working with, the type of therapist that we might be, that might have
exactly
an impact.
Exactly, yes.
Sure.
And Robert's developed a really lovely attachment questionnaire, which is specific to LGBTQ plus people, a bit like Paul Guillery's has developed one for African American people that's in his book. And it's like those things are just really important as well. Like when we first meet our clients and we're asking them about, their attachment experience, it's like there are questions in that are really crucial around some of the key aspects of our diversities. So, that is a really precious kind of new resource that will be coming out and becoming available more.
And it's different from really good therapy, as I would see it, which is basically being open and accepting and non-judgmental to anybody, and people hopefully being free and safe to be who they are in any therapy. I suppose that's the ideal. But
well, I think
more than that.
I think what we're doing nowadays around diversity is really, really important. And what we're doing is we're going from the naive notion of I'm just here to accept everybody because everybody's all the same, and I'm just there with the essence of the human being. To actually, for me to be really open to somebody, I do need to keep growing and developing. Yeah, it's like if you look at organizations like the BACP, what they're saying is you have an obligation as a therapist to grow and develop your understanding around diversity. What we can do when we say I'm just open to anybody is it can be a good excuse to do no growing, to do no searching for new knowledge and experience. It's just like, I am just this amazing human being who is just open to anything. Yeah, that's not good enough anymore. Yeah, and never was really good enough, but it's like we have evolved so much more now around this. We need to go and get the knowledge and the experience. We need to read the books. We need to go on the courses. We need to watch the TV programs, which have got these characters in them, so that we can, there's so much better TV programs nowadays, which really address LGBTQ plus experience. Yes. Yeah, getting inside things, noticing what it is that we think we know and we think we're all right with, but then our body reacts differently. Yeah. So it's like, for me, it would be something like, if there was one thing that I would want to absolutely get better next time, it would be around the use of the they, them pronouns. Yeah. It's like, I know I have an absolute commitment to using those. My head knows about using them, and I still struggle at times in remembering, because it's so automatic to say a sentence and not even know that I'm saying a she or a he or a they.
Yes.
So it's only by having experiences that we actually know what we're doing okay, what we want to be doing but we're not doing yet.
Yes.
What we want to feel good about, but actually we have an emotional experience that is contrary to that but needs dealing with.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's like we do have a responsibility for, to explore so much about LGBTQ plus experience, but also about race and about disability and about all the others and about how they intersect.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And I know that you're a real proponent of, come on, therapists, get educated, learn. There's so much to learn and we need to do it. And I know within BEFT you're driving this, and I'm sure we're going to see much more in the future. And Sandra, tell me, I'd love to know, what's your best takeaway from the externship, the LGBTQ plus externship? What's your best takeaway?
I think it was when I heard people say, I can breathe here.
Lovely.
Yeah, it was so profoundly emotional. You know, it's like, it's so easy to think, hasn't society got so much better?
Yeah.
You know, haven't we got so many more positive images around us? You know, can't we kind of just push and, you know, be there in all these environments? Yeah. And to be there and to really know that felt difference. And to know that I was part of supporting people to have that, you know, was just gorgeous. And, you know, if I didn't need something, you know, if I needed something to kind of push me forward in the work, which I don't, because I'm already there, kind of thing. But if I had needed anything, it would be that. You know, it's like to be able to offer that to people, to give them a space where they can feel as if they can be fully received and fully be themselves, to learn so much more fully, to be seen in the examples we give, and to be able to go back into the world and kind of, you know, have more EFT in the world because of it as well, is amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. Definitely.
Beautiful. I see how much that really means to you and really drives you on. It's sad. I find it sad that the other side of it is that in many other situations and trainings, maybe they can't breathe or they don't feel able to, these people. But in you gave this opportunity, you and Robert set this up. And that must have meant so much.
Absolutely. And I think the breathe bit, it's like, it's at so many different levels. You know, one is, you know, some people will not come out, if you like, in their training environments because they're not comfortable enough or safe enough. But it's also, you know, it's like when I think about it, when I read fiction, for example, and I read, you know, read plenty of books where I've got lots of heterosexual characters, and it's like it feels fine. Yeah. But then I go and read a book and it's got, you know, primary characters that are LGBTQ plus, and it's like it just feels so different. And sometimes you don't know until you're in an environment that it feels so different. And I imagine some of those participants knew how different it was going to feel, and that others will have had more of that experience where it's just like, wow, this is what it can feel like.
Yeah. This is precious. This was worth making the journey. This is worth actually participating in this training.
Exactly. And instead of having to translate from heterosexual to this, it's like, you know, we can learn in this environment and we can go out in the world and not just work with LGBTQ plus people, but work with heterosexual people as well. But it's like the translation can be the other way for a change.
Yes, 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 yes. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. What's next, Sandra?
What's next is we have an externship online planned, which will be next June, and that will be mountain time. So that's about 7 hours later. No, we are 7 hours later than them.
Okay.
So yeah, so the time that'll be that time zone.
Yeah.
We're also thinking about whether to do a core skills after that as well online to follow it up.
Yes.
And then we're also looking, you know, we're both kind of loaded down with different pieces of work, but we want to develop more continuing professional development for the therapists who already have done their externships and core skills. So we're starting to look at that. And we're also doing research. So we're doing some research. 2 of the helpers are the primary researchers, and Robert and I are, you know, the sort of second researchers. on the participants' experience of the externship. So that will be researched and written up and published and also taken back to ISEF. We've got a couple of the helpers who are writing an article for the ISEF newsletter. And then Robert and I and Caitlin, who was one of the helpers as well, we're also doing some research on lesbians and attachment. So there's actually lots of things happening at all sorts of different levels, which is just incredibly exciting.
Yes, yeah. Well done. This is great. This is great. So anybody that wants to participate, get involved, jump onto the next externship. Yeah. Contact
Absolutely. Yes.
Taylor.
Yes.
Yes. At your company, Acre EFT Training.
Exactly.
Yes. And all welcome.
Indeed. Yes. Anybody who is affirming of LGBTQ plus people is welcome at any of our LGBTQ plus centered trainings. Absolutely. And we hope lots of people will come.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic, Sandra, what you're doing. Thank you.
And I just remembered that I'm doing something around this and around kind of working with this group of people at the BEFT conference, which is on October the 8th in London.
Yes, I look forward to that. I look forward to hearing you talk more there and learning more from you. And gosh, I'm even tempted to come and get involved somewhere, maybe on one of your externships. It sounds
wonderful.
Great. Sandra, thank you so much. Thank you for your commitment to EFT, your commitment to the BEFT Centre, everything you've done in Britain. You've done so much. You're a real trailblazer, and it's a privilege to know you and to interview you. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Celia. Yeah, and thank you for being interested in this. It's so important to me, and I'm glad that you've really wanted to